Claire, I've been rewatching David vs. Goliath, and I noticed a dangerous moment.
Oh, really? On Survivor, dangerous moments? They usually mean someone is smiling too much right before a blindside.
Exactly. The entire beach finally agrees to one thing.
Which is terrible news for exactly one person.
And that one person is Christian.
Oh yes, Christian. The puzzle solver, the narrator, the lovable genius, the person everyone can name and who also just had a son. He was also on the most recent Survivor season.
Well, congratulations to him. As he knows, as anybody else knows, in Survivor, being the person everyone can name is basically a boarding pass to Ponderosa.
Because visibility can protect you early on, but expose you later.
Today, we're talking about credit.
Who gets it?
Who deserves it?
And why credit is not ego.
It's power. Welcome back to Outwit, Outplay, Outorganize, where reality TV tactics meet real-world power plays. I'm Tykee James.
And I'm Claire Douglass, strategist, trainer, campaign nerd, and someone who has absolutely watched a coalition win a major campaign and then immediately fumble the victory press release.
Which is how movements manage to say, we won, and still somehow everyone leaves the Zoom call furious.
Today's episode is called Credit is Power.
Which sounds like something you mutter right before locking a very intense Google document.
Oh, it is a Google Doc episode, but a spicy one.
Let's hear the thesis.
All right, here it is. Credit is power because the people who get recognized for the win inherit the resources, trust, political protection, and invitations for the next fight. So if your campaign wins the policy, but your people disappear from the story, you've only won half of that victory.
That is good. And something that I've seen experienced in coalitions past.
We all did.
And for listeners who haven't spent years watching people betray each other in beachwear, Survivor is a social strategy game. Players form alliances, vote each other out, and at the end, the people they voted out decide who deserves to win the $1 million.
Which means the game isn't just about making moves. It's about how people remember your moves.
So today we're asking, who gets remembered?
And who gets erased?
And who gets the power to lead the next fight? Okay, let me see if I've got the arc from the last few of our episodes.
All right, let's hear it.
In episode 8, the David Coalition finally got power and then immediately started wobbling. Not like you see on a wedding dance floor. No, not that wobble. Carl overplayed his leadership. Gabby realized she was vulnerable. And Angelina negotiated rice, then reminded everyone about it like she was sending out an invoice around camp.
Which gave us one of our core coalition rules. Credit must be assigned by the group, not aggressively claimed by the individual.
Because if you have to keep saying, remember who got you the rice stopped being food and started being a hostage situation.
That's exactly right. That episode showed us how bad credit politics destabilizes alliances.
And then in the next episode, we saw the swing vote economy.
The phase where nobody has a stable majority. So the most powerful player isn't necessarily the leader. It's the person who decides which leader survives.
And today, we move to consolidation.
Yes, insurgents are often great at winning power. Governing coalitions have to learn how to distribute it.
And one of the things they distribute is credit.
And credit is not a thank you note, although I do love a good thank you note. Credit is infrastructure.
So walk me through Christian's situation.
Christian starts the season as the ultimate David. He's not the biggest physical threat. He's not the loudest. He's not the big alpha male. He's a robotic scientist with a dry wit and a puzzle-solving brain that makes everyone else look like they're trying to assemble IKEA furniture in the dark.
All without that tiny little wrench, right?
Exactly. Early on, his visibility helps the Davids. The Goliaths have visible power, muscles, status, confidence, money, credentials. Christian has invisible power, pattern recognition, calm under pressure, technical skill.
The human slingshot.
Exactly. He gives the Davids a story. We're not powerless. We have tools the Goliaths don't see.
But by the end of the game, the same visibility becomes dangerous.
Because now everyone knows he's really good, and everyone likes him, and everyone can imagine him sitting at the final tribal council, explaining his game beautifully, and as a result, winning the votes.
He becomes the person everyone can name.
And in Survivor, if everyone can name you, they can also vote you out.
Surprises me that people thought I was such a huge threat that I needed to go as soon as they can marshal the votes.
But Christian isn't the only one moving the game, right?
That's right. Mike White, famously known for White Lotus, excellent show, is maneuvering. Kara is connected to almost every cross-alliance conversation. Davey is trying to manage Nick. Allison is sharing information. And Nick is doing fake idol theater.
Yeah, he created a fake idol to throw people off and make them stop looking for the real one.
And I'm just letting everybody congratulate me. And the whole time, this idol's fake. It's not real. And it just works beautiful. Like, it's too easy.
It's a bold artistic choice.
Yes, of course, very avant-garde. Not necessarily effective.
So Christian is the symbol, but other people are building the conditions.
And this is the key lesson. The most powerful person is not always the person at the podium. Sometimes it's the person who built the conditions that made the podium matter in the first place.
That is a campaign truth.
In campaigns, the person quoted in the newspaper is not always the person who flipped the swing votes. The politician cutting the ribbon is not always the organizer who dragged them to the table. The person on the stage is not always the person who made the stage possible.
So the lesson is not hide your best people.
No, visibility matters. Public leadership matters. Spokespeople matter. But visibility has to be connected to an organized power base.
Because if the story is Christian is the movement, then taking out Christian weakens the movement.
Right. But if the story is Christian is one visible leader inside a durable web of organized people, then removing Christian changes the board. But it doesn't erase the work.
That feels like another great campaign truth, a lesson in the movement.
It is. A movement that needs one hero has a vulnerability. A movement that builds many visible leaders has power. So let's make this practical. A coalition wins a major policy campaign. One large organization gets the headline, and they have one spokesperson that gets the interview. Everyone else gets the thank you email. So, what's the problem?
Well, the obvious problem, and something that I've had in my experience, is that people feel used in that type of circumstance.
As they should. That is a transactional relationship versus a transformational relationship that we've talked about on this podcast earlier. And so let's go a little bit deeper on that. What happens after the press hit?
Well, the funders read the news article. They assume that one organization did all of the work, and then that one organization gets more money. They get to have more access, more meetings with more very important people, and then more authority when the next campaign rolls around.
Let's keep going on this. Can you say more?
Yeah, certainly. While all that's happening, people who actually moved the base, counted the votes, drafted the policy, brought trusted messengers along, or took the political risk, they're the ones who get treated like the background singers.
And as a result, that coalition is the type that gets weaker. People stop trusting the process. They start protecting their own credit instead of building shared power.
So the question isn't who deserves applause.
The question is, who needs visible power so the next fight is stronger? If the public story does not match the real power base, your coalition becomes less durable.
Let's take this outside of Survivor for a second.
Let's talk about Montgomery, Alabama.
The same Montgomery, Alabama with Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the bus boycott, that one?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it also on a previous episode. The simplified story is Rosa Parks was tired. She refused to move. And then Dr. King led the movement.
Powerful and very incomplete story.
Sure is. Rosa Parks was not a passive participant in history. She was an organizer. She was the secretary of the local NAACP. She had training, relationships, and very good political judgment.
And the boycott did not sustain itself for more than a year on vibes.
It absolutely did not. It ran on infrastructure. The Women's Political Council, Joanne Robinson, E.D. Nixon, church networks, the Montgomery Improvement Association, volunteer drivers for carpooling, dispatchers, people walking miles to work, and thousands of Black residents sustaining economic pressure day after day after day.
And that wasn't just a single moment. It was an engine, not a cute little lawnmower engine. This was a full civic transit system running on church basements, carpools, shoe leather, and complex logistics.
Amen. And Dr. King was a brilliant moral communicator and leader, but he became the public voice of a movement that already had organizers, institutions, relationships, and strategy underneath it.
So the podium mattered because of the conditions that have been built.
Yes, and that distinction matters because when history remembers only the hero, the infrastructure gets erased. It disappears. Future organizers and just people learn the wrong lesson. They think change comes from flawless heroes instead of an organized base.
Inspiration says, be brave.
And strategy says, build the conditions where bravery can matter.
And opposition targets the visible symbol because that symbol is easier to identify than the entire system.
Exactly. Let's go back to Christian. So once Christian becomes a visible strategic threat, the move is simple. Vote him out. But if power is distributed, the work is going to survive.
Certainly, when we talk about Survivor, the stakes are relatively low in that getting voted off of the island. You go back to Florida. In movement work, you don't get voted out. In movement work, you get taken out. And so there's certainly a respect to the stark contrast and what can be at stake, but the example is still very clear.
That's right. The Survivor is very low stakes, which is why it's so useful to talk about and you can see all the inner workings. But when we're talking about the civil rights movement, affordability issues, labor issues, like women's rights issues, the list can continue. The stakes are very high.
Let's go to one of your campaign examples, Claire, the Arkansas Solar Access Act.
Yeah, so in 2019, I helped lead the strategy and really was the architect behind this campaign to pass the Arkansas Solar Access Act, a major bipartisan renewable energy bill in a very deep red state. The goal was clear, pass the bill. But the strategy was not make a climate argument or environmental argument and hope Arkansas becomes a blue state like Vermont.
That's a strong choice.
Yeah, and we power mapped the state. Utilities had enormous power and influence. So we built a coalition that could move conservative legislators from all different directions. Walmart, small businesses, the Christian Coalition, local governments, and of course, the environmentalists. But we also needed the Republican champions.
So if that's your audience, I would assume that the message was energy freedom, local control, economic development, and cost savings for the regular person.
Well said. And the tactics followed from that strategy. The policy drafting, figuring out the votes, the lobbying strategy, the corporate engagement, getting handwritten constituent letters. We had volunteer petition drives and we had a lobby day, or several of them actually, right? We did all of these tactics, but it stemmed from that core strategy that we needed to build power that Republican leaders would listen to, right? Who are those right messengers? So
you did all of this without a magical press release?
Yeah, no, the answer is never going to be a magic press release or just the exact right polling and messaging and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, the bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. It was a historical win. The utility had never lost a policy campaign. So by the end, when they saw the writing was on the wall, they actually changed their position officially to neutral because they didn't want to lose.
Wow.
It was pretty great. But the post-campaign story taught a different lesson. Credit doesn't automatically follow the work.
Meaning?
After the win, the public narrative naturally gravitated towards big brands and the best-known organizations and the groups with stronger media infrastructure or whatever it might be. And some local organizers, volunteers, strategists, partners who really built the leverage were, again, thanked privately and not always recognized publicly.
And that matters because credit becomes currency.
Yes. Credit turns into funding, reputation, access. It determines who funders and reporters and who's going to call you next time. And it also determines who gets invited to sitting down at that strategy table to pick the next campaign or, set that agenda.
So when you don't appropriately distribute credit, the consequences aren't just hurt feelings.
Yeah, no, it's not just hurt feelings. The problem was that the victory didn't get converted into durable infrastructure. We had organizers, volunteers, we had the right policy expertise, the right local messengers, the lobbyists, all the coalition partners. And we knew how to work together. We learned how to work together. And that is precious. That is not a moment to walk away. That's a moment to go deeper and keep building on what you had already won.
Because the win created capacity.
That's right. We had the trust. We had trained volunteers. We have great working relationships with key champions that we developed through that campaign. We had business allies. We had the public story that worked in a conservative state. It ended up saving school districts hundreds of thousands of dollars that ended up being millions of dollars and giving teachers raises, right? Like, we had all of this great stuff to build from. But if the story after the win is, great job, everyone, on to the next campaign and the next issue or the next state, then the power you built starts to dissipate.
And then the opposition gets another turn.
That's right. And years later, renewable energy policy and that utility I talked about before, they kept coming back and back because they were there for the long term.
Right.
And they started to erode other renewable energy policy in the state because we didn't sustain what we had built and we didn't keep expanding upon it. I mean, it wasn't me, it wasn't my decision. That's a difference between short-term thinking and long-term thinking and movement building. But I should say they treated the win like an endpoint instead of the foundation.
So you could win the big bill and still lose the terrain?
Yep. You can win the bill and still lose the terrain if you don't defend and grow the power that made the bill possible in the first place.
Which means you can win the policy and still fail to strengthen the people who made that win possible.
Exactly. Winning the policy is only half of the battle. You also have to win the win.
You know, I've heard people say that before and I never understood what it means. What is that? Can you define that?
Winning the win means telling the story of how the victory actually happened. So the people who built the power gained more power from that victory so that they continue to build on that work.
Now, you have another example of a campaign like this time with Atlantic offshore drilling.
Yeah, this campaign is something that I led at an organization from 2013 until 2017. And the power map was bleak with a side of impossible, literally having people tell me you're not going to be able to win, but you're just going to have to make a stink about it.
Well, how bad could it be? You already did some great work in a deeply red state.
Well, yeah, there are parts of it that were very technical. Big oil had enormous money and lobbying power. Governors, both Republican and Democrats, supported opening up their waters to drilling at the time. The industry narrative was that this is going to create jobs and revenue and energy security. And a few years later, the Obama administration included the Atlantic into their plan to develop offshore drilling resources.
So the Goliath, in this case, had the sword, the armor, the lobbyists, the talking points, the money, the infrastructure.
Yes, the Goliath, you also might know them as the American Petroleum Institute and all their fun friends. We could not win by sounding like a national environmental organization lecturing coastal towns about marine biology because we, of course, want to save the whales and dolphins. Not a great narrative frame for building power. So we had to change the terrain. We reframed the issue around local economies, local control, fishing, tourism, and the coastal way of life.
And the messengers?
Well, we organized the coastal mayors, small business owners, fishing leaders, restaurant owners, chambers of commerce, residents all along the Atlantic that were in the blast zone.
The people who would actually see and feel the impact.
Right. The campaign really caught fire in Curry Beach, North Carolina. The mayor at the time had signed a pro-drilling letter backed by an oil industry front group without consulting the town council or the constituents. So we had on-the-ground organizers. We partnered with local groups. We got people out. We did the social medias. We packed this council meeting with more than 300 residents, and that's a lot when you have only 1,200 year-round residents.
Did they win the vote?
Actually, no. And that's the important part. The loss became an organizing hook. The mayor of the neighboring town, Carolina Beach, was also in the audience. He saw the power that was in that room. And so when he went back to his council, they passed a resolution unanimously opposing drilling and searching for oil the very next week. Literally, the writing was on the wall. He's like, oh, I do not want this to be in my town council next week. He got the memo.
So that was the first domino.
Yeah. And then we turned that into a template. Organizing guides, localized fact sheets, tracking, like we tracked all of this stuff. And we organized all of these coastal states and their communities up and down the coast. Towns started competing to be the next one on the map. We tracked every resolution, and we literally built a physical opposition binder.
Yeah, good thing you did there. Not a fan of binders, personally.
Okay, that's mind-blowing and hard to disagree. But by March of 2016, over 100 East Coast municipalities had formally opposed offshore drilling and seismic airgun blasting from that one little domino to a massive wildfire.
So that one domino was not just one spokesperson.
No, it was distributed power. And when we held DC media roundtables, we didn't make Oceana the hero of the story. We literally brought the Business Alliance for Protecting the Atlantic Coast to DC, the mayors and council members, the fishermen, right?
You made the coastal leaders the story.
Exactly. We helped host it, but we intentionally minimized the NGO voices. We put the mayors, the fishing leaders, the small business owners, the coastal messengers at the center of the story and at the podium. They had the microphones.
So the strategy was not just to share credit after the win.
Right. The strategy was to distribute visible power before the final decision. The story was not Oceana fights big oil and wins. The story was coastal communities are defending their homes, economies, fisheries, and way of life.
And that's a lot harder to dismiss.
It is much harder. We built power with local communities, and then we used that power to influence governors, Congress, federal agencies, and ultimately the White House. The Atlantic was removed from the drilling plan. But the deeper win is that the leadership stayed on the coast.
That's organizing yourself out of a job.
And our strategy was never to make the organization look the most powerful. The strategy was to make coastal communities powerful. Strategic credit distribution made the movement harder to erase, harder to dismiss, and harder to defeat.
So let me try to square this circle.
Go for it.
Arkansas shows what happens when credit concentrates after a win.
Correct.
Atlantic drilling shows what happens when credit is intentionally distributed as part of the strategy.
Keep going. That's right.
And Christian shows what happens when one person becomes the visible symbol of a whole power structure.
That's right. The lesson is not never take credit. False humility is not strategy. The lesson is assign credit truthfully and strategically.
Truthfully. That's a part that really matters there.
It really does. And if a volunteer leader brought 20 people to the hearing, name them. If a community took that political risk, center them. If a local business owner made the argument that moved conservative lawmakers, don't bury them under a wall of logos.
Oh, yes, the logo wall, the nonprofit version of camouflage.
Yeah, and if a funder asks who led, tell the real story, not the easiest story, not the cleanest story, the real one.
Because the real story tells you where the power is.
Exactly. Credit is a power map. It shows who is expected to lead next, who funders think matter, who media sees as legitimate, and who gets protected when things get hard.
And who gets treated as disposable.
Yes. If people believe they will be erased after the win, they start protecting themselves during the fight. But if you distribute credit well and people see themselves in the win, they stay. They recruit others. They believe the coalition is a place where their work becomes power, not just someone else's brand.
So what's the rule then?
The rule is if the story of the win erases the people who built the power, the coalition becomes weaker for the next fight.
All right, bird nerds, it's time for Winning on the Wing.
Ooh, my favorite campaign strategy segment disguised as bird content.
Today, murmurations.
Ooh.
You know those huge clouds of starlings that twist and fold across the sky like somebody spilled ink and the ink learned choreography?
Beautiful, slightly spooky, and very organized.
Exactly, more or less. And here's the thing. A murmuration doesn't move because one celebrity bird is up front with a tiny microphone yelling, "Follow me to the left." The flock moves because each bird is responding to the birds closest to it. Tiny little signals instead. Constant adjustment, shared awareness. No single bird owns the pattern for very long, but together they create something that predators cannot easily break apart.
Which is exactly the credit lesson.
Yes, if you only credit one bird, you misunderstand the power. The beauty is in the coordination.
And the durability is in the distribution. If one bird drops back, the murmuration, it keeps moving because the intelligence is shared across the flock.
That's the goal for coalitions. Don't build a movement where one person has to be the whole sky.
Build one where the pattern survives because everyone knows how to move together.
Credit the flock, not just the bird up front.
And that's how you keep power in motion and keep winning on the wing. This week's power move is called Win the Win Map.
I love maps. I love winning. I love mapping the way you want to win.
After a win, the story hardens fast. If you do not intentionally distribute credit, the loudest logo becomes the entire story.
Use this map to decide who must be at the table for the next campaign.
Because if they built the power that won the last fight, they belong at the center of the next one. That is how you turn credit into durable power.
If this episode made you think of a campaign where the wrong people got the microphone or where a coalition intentionally shared the spotlight and got stronger, we want to hear that story.
Email us at hello@newfundamentals.com. Tell us who built the real power, who walked away with the credit, and what you would do differently next time.
Next episode, we're talking about durability and the jury.
Because survivor juries and movements have one big thing in common.
They remember.
They remember who built trust,
Who hoarded credit,
who made them feel disposable.
and who helped the whole flock get home.
Until next time,
Outwit.
outplay,
Outorganize.
outorganize.